Welcome to the Life with Joey Calvo Podcast. I am Joey Calvo. Please continue to help the victims of the California wildfires. They do still need our help. Today, our guest is Betsy Kudlinski. She is a somatic experiencing practitioner and somatic experiencing training assistant. Being a freedom guide means somatic experiencing over 3 decades of working with animals and life coaching sprinkled in. She's also actively working on becoming a resource for those dealing with the trauma of climate change and other massive topics, the immediate effects, and the existential crisis. She's also a freedom guide, like a nature guide. She'll walk by your side through your own animal and human nature, encouraging and supporting you to find out as you find and connect with your true nature. Betsy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Joey.
All right. So explain how you got to where we're at right now.
Where I'm at right now. I started out as an animal kid and a horse girl, and then was just an animal person all the way along. I was a zookeeper for several years after college. And then, I found myself sick. I have fibromyalgia. So one of those chronic illnesses that are completely invisible. And I have crashed twice in my life. I call it crashing, when I have to lay on the couch for 6 to 12 months and do absolutely nothing before I can pull myself back together again to be okay to function in this world. And in between the last two crashes, I actually kind of looked at my symptoms, and I looked at, I compared them to ideas of what trauma, PTSD, and complex PTSD can look like. The mental symptoms, the emotional symptoms, the physical symptoms. And I was like, well, it looks like I have trauma, but I can't think anything that's ever bad happened to me. And so I just kind of kept going. I'm like, okay, well, it fits really well. So I started working with my own somatic experiencing practitioner several years ago. And then I crashed again. COVID did me in, not getting COVID, but like the prolonged stress of the panic of COVID. And so as I was coming out of that crash, I still had support from my own practitioner, and I went into training to be a somatic experiencing practitioner myself. And so that's a 3-year training, and I've been working steadily since I started that training. And so I have found a ton of my own symptoms, both the things that I would consider complex PTSD symptoms and fibromyalgia symptoms have dramatically decreased or almost gone away. Like, for instance, I had 30 to 31 migraines a month for, I don't know, 8 years of my life. And now I have one every 6 months or so.
Okay. All right. So, so you went through these crashes, and then the third one was via, through through COVID and so on. Can you explain to our viewers, some that may not know, what PTSD really is?
Sure. The man who started somatic experiencing is Peter Levine, and he calls trauma is in the body, not in the event. So the same two people can go through the exact same event, but their bodies will hold it differently afterwards. So we think of PTSD as physical assault or an environmental disaster or war or these giant events. And so we usually label those as big T traumas, or I would call them shock traumas, like basically single events that then leave a lasting effect. Usually because, you were surprised, or your body couldn't carry out all of the biological like processes that we would be able to do in the wild, right? Like if we weren't stuck in a car, like things go too fast, right? Car accidents are another big one. And our systems just can't like finish it, and then we get into the ambulance and we start to shake, which is our body's way of like finishing that huge amount of energy. And the paramedics are like, wait, don't shake, right? Either because it bothers them, or like you might have a neck injury and you don't want, they don't want you to shake. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them telling you that, but it means that we often internalize a lot of expressions of what went on for us. And then that becomes, whether it's from a shock trauma, or I mentioned complex PTSD, and that's a series of events. And that could be when you were teeny tiny. That's usually developmental trauma, or it could be at some point in your life, right? You talk about gaslighting and living with a narcissist and an abusive relationship, stuff like that. That's not one event. But then our bodies continue to internalize and learn how to cope with whatever has happened, right? So whatever happened in that shock trauma, whatever happened in that series, our bodies did the very best they could in that moment, and it kept us alive, and it kind of codes into the software. And so then we continue to react like that. And it's perhaps not the healthiest way to react to present day circumstances, but that's not really a choice. Once we've got a neuronal pathway that does that, like once it's coded into our software, we often don't have a choice. And so that's what PTSD or complex PTSD or developmental trauma is. It's our body continuing to we call them trauma patterns, or like it's the way we continue to behave. That's the external view of it, right? But it's not a choice. It's what happens. It's reactivity, right? It's just what happens. We usually don't even have a pause. We don't have seconds to decide how we're going to react to something. Body does it automatically.
Okay. So on your website, BetsyKudlinski.com, you also mentioned about climate change.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain how that is really affecting us?
Yeah. It's near and dear to my heart. I've been reading about it and following it for 25 years, which I know is a fraction of the amount of time that we as humans have known that it was a thing. But so you are asking about donating to the wildfires, or for the people affected by the wildfires in California. We just had enormous floods in Texas. These are again single events, natural disasters that are dramatically increased by climate change. And so that's an easy one, right? Like, it's not easy. It's horrifying and terrible, and it's affecting more and more and more people. But we can work with that as a shock trauma. It's horror. It's survivor's guilt. It's whatever you physically went through yourself, right? There's a lot of pieces to a natural disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But then the greater context is climate change is human caused, right? So it is us separating ourselves from the natural world and then extracting from the natural world, pretending like we don't belong to it, pretending like we aren't inextricably linked, right? And so there's a mindset that we have all grown up with, and it's a generational thing, right? And the way that we interact with the earth, the natural world, and that it separates us from ourselves too. So climate change is the big single events. Hopefully it's single events, right? Like it becomes series of events, but it's also, it's from there all the way through to the way that we even look and interact with this world that we are inextricably linked to. And so there's a lot of underlying generational complex trauma that goes with that, because we're pretending like we aren't organic.
Okay.
And we become extractive for ourselves too.
Okay. You also mentioned about being a freedom guy. Can you explain?
Sure. Yeah, I call myself a freedom guide because although I have training in life coaching, I am mostly a somatic experiencing practitioner who comes to it from decades, 3+ decades of working professionally with animals. And then it's informed with life coaching if somebody is okay or wants that flavor. And so I talk about my work as I'm walking along with you as your nervous system heals. And that's resolving trauma, that's everything. But in healing, in resolving, in working with me, there becomes this natural, for most people, freedom. So instead of being a nature guide, right, like, and telling you about the birds and the trees and the flowers and the like the processes of the forest, which I could totally do, I'm helping you understand yourself so that you can go off on walks and figure out how your own nervous system works and how your own body works, and get curious and interested in that. And like I said, there's a huge freedom in being able to work with yourself.
Okay. I'm going to give you a scenario. Actually, it's my own. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in 2009. I am someone who is a caring person to everyone else but themselves.
Oh yeah.
I am a person who is starting to get out and walk around and start to enjoy what life is like, but at the same time wants to self-isolate because those people that supposedly care about them only want to see you flat on your face, making you feel like you're not worthy. What kind of advice would you give someone like me in reference to that?
First, I would say I'm super sorry. That
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I have gone through the anxiety and depression and the isolation personally, and I watch a lot of people do it. And so first, I'm just going to validate your experience because it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And your understanding, your knowledge that people aren't out there to see you succeed has got to feel just I'm deeply impressed that you actually are doing this, right? You're out there succeeding, regardless of what other people want you to do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, people say I'm making a difference, but I don't feel like I am.
So when somebody says, Joey, that you're making a difference, is it possible to actually take that in? When somebody says that you've made a difference in their life.
I actually did, to find out that it wasn't, I'm not saying it wasn't showing, but I mean, I took it in. I was okay with it, but to find out it was all like an act. It felt like an act. It felt like, they were just saying it just to boost my, to boost.
Yeah.
And as I'm realizing that it was an act, it's like, it made me feel like I lied to myself. Like everything I'm doing is like good. And, I'm my own worst enemy. And usually anything I find that if I find something wrong within me, I will attack it till, until it gets to the point where, it's beaten to a pulp.
Yeah.
Per se.
And you do that to you, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you ever, so if you could go back
Mm-hmm.
to when somebody has said that you made a difference in their life, and just rest with that a second, right? The gremlins come in, right? They always come in and say, oh, well, they didn't show it in the way that I thought they should have shown it, right?
Yeah.
But taking it in and going, oh, hey, somebody even cared enough to make me feel like I was making a difference, regardless of what that difference was.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody cared enough about me to say that.
Yeah.
And if you just hold that for a second.
Oh, I did. I held it for
right now.
But right now, I mean, I'm holding it.
Now.
But at the same time that I'm holding it, I feel like I just want to throw it out the window because it feels like an act as I'm holding it.
Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like an act. And this is, I might suggest that it's kind of an example of what I was talking about earlier about how the nervous system and our bodies protect ourselves in the same way that it used to work for us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing wrong with the way that your body and your nervous system works.
Mm-hmm.
It works the way that worked best at some point, right? And so let's see, you asked for suggestions.
Yeah. Kind of an idea, because right now, like I said, the person that I thought was really being there for me and saying, that I made a difference in their life just made me realize they were acting. It was all an act. It was, just like I said, just saying it just to, get me to be positive and look forward. And
that sounds like it hurts. And I'm sorry.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
one of the things that I'm going to suggest is, you said when you first started talking, you said that you have depression and anxiety and that you're starting to get out a little bit and walk around. Where do you go to walk, Joey?
Usually to McDonald's or the supermarket. Or, well, actually, with the exception of the past couple days, I did take a I will say this, because one thing about me is, and people would probably tell you, oh,
See, I'm not worried about what other people tell
well,
me.
no, I'm just
Worried
saying.
about what you tell me.
Right,
So
right.
the last couple days, what have your walks been like?
Okay, so like I said, if it's not to McDonald's or to the supermarket, I did take like I said, another thing I do when at least once a week now, it's because I'm not, I'm unemployed right now, and I usually gather a little money together, is I go to the casinos. So there's a casino here in Philly, and I actually walked from my house to that casino, which is about 4 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that almost twice.
Yeah.
Within the past.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
so when you go walking, you said that you suggested earlier when you were talking about it that it feels kind of good to go out.
It does.
And right, like there's a but there.
There, yep. And
how does it feel good? No.
Okay.
We can go to the but in a minute.
Okay.
How does it feel good to go walking to McDonald's, to the grocery store, to the casino?
Thankful to be alive.
Yeah. Joey, how can you tell that you're thankful to be alive when you're walking?
Because God just said, and recently, he has been letting me know that, I am needed. Because my mother, who is about to be 94 in about 2 weeks, just had about 2 strokes. And as I was put into the panic zone, quote unquote, in reference to it, he reminded me that, he did give me people, like I said earlier, that would care.
Yeah.
But in reference to the but to that
we're still not at the but yet.
Okay. But
how can you tell that God is there and helping you, and so that you're thankful to be alive, you're thankful to be there taking care of your mom, being able to take care of your 94-year-old mom?
Oh, I'm not taking care of her. I mean, she's in Jersey. I'm in Philly.
Okay.
Yeah, but finding out that
you made it through. He helped you make it through, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. He reminds me that he kept the door open, and that was the door I told you earlier. Well, I didn't mention it as a door, but I mentioned it as someone who cared. I made a difference for, but it felt like an act.
Okay.
So that's the door that God has kept open for me.
Yeah.
And God has also
do you feel like it's
me
still open?
I wish I could shut it. Right now, I wish I could shut it.
You wish you could shut it and protect yourself more, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And yet, you still keep going for these walks where you're thankful to be alive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, I do that. Well, sometimes I have to do it because I need to. Other times, I just want to crawl up in bed and just forget life exists. But at the same time, God reminded me that this podcast, like you mentioned earlier, that I'm even doing this.
Yeah.
God reminded me that this podcast was my therapy too for my anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You get to pick who's going to be on your podcast.
Right.
You get to talk to people who are interesting and fascinating and can take you out of your depression and anxiety for even just a couple of minutes, kind of like taking walks, right?
Yeah.
So what if that's a different door?
It kind of is.
Yeah.
That door, I walked through that door, and because of that, like even when I came across you on the when I got back to you, I was in a mega blitz, quote unquote, because when I got promoted on the podcastguests.com newsletter, I had, no lie, Betsy, I had over 100 people.
Wow.
So, and then when I went to reach out to all of you, some took a little bit of time, like you did, and others, got right away. And just also, there has been some benefits to it that one of the people that was on that list actually has hundreds of clients, and most of them will be on this podcast between starting Friday until March of 2026.
Wow.
So I had to open up other days. I mean, you were lucky enough to get in before that, all these, because normally when I do these podcasts, I usually do them Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. I had to get to the point where I had to open up Fridays and Wednesdays. So,
Talk about having a job, huh, Joey?
yeah, but the only thing is, I'm not getting paid for it. That's the only downfall to it. So
sounds like some sort of purpose, though. Like there's a reason for being there. I'm sorry that you're not getting paid for it.
Yeah.
I really empathize. I get that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I get unemployment because when I was working.
Yeah.
So I mean, but that's about to run out. I also, on the bottom of the ticker, I have a GoFundMe because I'm raising money to improve this podcast to where I can do something and really make a difference with it.
Yeah. What kind of difference do you want to make with this podcast, Joey?
Glad you asked. Because as of Friday, if everything goes right, this podcast is going to be sponsored. But
that's exciting.
But the sponsoring, there's not a lot of money involved right now, as of right now. So I've been turning around, and I have, like I said, the GoFundMe is because the equipment that I'm using right now for this is outdated. Matter of fact, if I took a picture of the actual equipment, people would be like, "Why is it still around?" Like, because
and yet it works. So
yeah,
go back to telling me what you want this. What do you want this podcast to turn into? Okay,
now I haven't announced this yet because who knows what's going to happen after this weekend. I did make an attempt to get this podcast on Sirius XM and, make it out, so it can be out there. I made an appointment for this podcast to be on World Broadcasting Network TV.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Internet TV. So that's this weekend.
That's a big
If that does go through, then this podcast will be its own TV show.
Yeah.
And all guests like yourself and others, you know, will be able to be not just on YouTube live, but also on in other places on the internet in reference to TV wise.
Yeah.
The third thing that I was working on, and I still feel optimistic about, even though that door that I told you earlier, that's an act, you know, saying they made a difference. I wanted to do like a meet and greet of having guests like yourself and others that have been on the podcast before come down to Atlantic City, being I'm in Philadelphia. And I mean, I picked out this wonderful location. I mean, the location is amazing because it's really, I mean, I liked it. I like it. And plus,
I can tell just by looking at you that you really love this location.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is something that I really wanted to do because this is my way of saying, hey, I want to make a difference back. And, you know, eventually after the first one, if there's a second meet and greet ever done, then I would do it for charity. Like a portion would go for charity or something like that. But when I looked at the location I wanted to do it at, and normally I'm never this positive about myself in reference to this, but this was something that I really want to do. I really wanted to do this.
Yeah.
Because
I can see that. It's amazing.
And I mean, you know, like I said, I guess like yourself, I was looking at Liz River. She's an adult actress that has been on the podcast before. She has the number 3 podcast now ever done. The door, because that door that I mentioned earlier, not only was, you know, like I said, was one that said I made a difference, but had became the number 1 fan and number 1 supporter. Well, I was going to bring that person down. And I mean, and every time I kept thinking about it, I kept thinking it was going to be so amazing because, you know, the opportunity of expanding to where, you know, being up close and personal. But that started to fade a little because of, again, the door making me feel like it was all an act about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm contrasting your excitement over Sirius XM and internet TV and a meet and greet, right? There is so much excitement about what this podcast could become.
Right.
Right. And I'm wondering if that excitement, if you can hold that excitement and look at that door that sucked.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I do
feel the excitement.
In reference to that, I did. I mean, I still have, you know, I still feel optimistic that it can happen. But at the same time that I'm feeling that optimism for it, it's hurting because the part of it is not happening.
Yeah.
Because
but can you feel, isn't it amazing, Joey?
Yeah.
That you can feel that optimism and that excitement and also grief or betrayal or shit, I have to find another way for this to work. Isn't it amazing that you can feel both? You have the capacity to feel both of those things. This hasn't slammed you into the ground because you still have plans. You still have dreams for this podcast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only thing that's hurting right now of it is the quote unquote support.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that hurts in reference to this podcast, and I mentioned earlier about the casinos and stuff, I actually did a podcast about what a true friend is. Mm-hmm. And when I mentioned what a true friend is, one thing that I threw out there is physically being out there with me. You know, you can't be a virtual friend and say, oh, yeah, let's do this. Well, you can't do it if you're virtual, you know?
Oh, so friends have to be in person.
Yes. At least once, because of that casino thing. Because when I go to the casino and I'm by myself, it's like, it's the anxiety and depression. It's the loneliness. It's like, you know, it just hurts because someone's not there attempting to get me away from it.
Oh, you need somebody else to help you with that.
Right. Yeah. And I've been seeing
what? That's a thing, Joey. I want to just pause you for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that's a thing. We are social animals.
Mm-hmm.
We are not supposed to be alone. And those of us who feel like we have to do everything alone and we can't reach out for help and we must figure out everything by ourselves,
mm-hmm.
That's a trauma response.
Yeah. And it got...
So you need other people. And I might suggest that, yes, we absolutely need people in the flesh.
Yeah.
And if you can get support virtually, it's better than nothing.
But the only thing is, virtual only does to a certain point. Like when I go to Atlantic City, okay, and you know, I do podcasts once in a while from Atlantic City as well because I get these overnight stays and stuff. So when I do them, you know, I would be happy if someone came down, like I said, not only to get me away from wanting to go to the casino at night and doing something else, because then I start to get labeled, because then the labeling starts.
Labeling from others or labeling from you?
Yes. Saying, oh, you're an addict. You're a gambling addict because you're always at the slot machines. And that's why I keep saying, when I did that, after, matter of fact, even as I did an Instagram live, I did a Facebook live, I did a Twitter live from the beach, literally saying, listen, if you were here right now, I would not be at a slot machine. We could be doing other things.
Yeah.
And that's something
I hear what you're saying. I think I hear what you're saying. So I think that what I'm hearing you say is that you need other people to come and help you from falling into old patterns.
Right. Because that's why I'm feeling like the self-isolation right now. Is because when I've reached out and said, hey, I'm going to be down here, you know, come join me. Not even I'm on my way, or, you know, because everybody has their lives. And I understand that. I do understand that. And sometimes when I do go, like when I've been going to the casinos down in Atlantic City, I've been going late at night too. But there's a reason. There's a method to my madness for that. But when I'm down there for 2 nights, doesn't mean, you can't take a little bit of time, or if you have that little bit of time after work, if it's a Wednesday night or a Thursday night, come down, hang out with me for at least an hour or 2.
It sounds like you've been hurt pretty bad there, right?
Yes.
You really want this person to come and be there with you, or these people to come and be there with you.
It wasn't just that person at the time. It was like any of my friends.
Yeah.
And
I'm also hearing that you are persisting in making your podcast. Like you go to Atlantic City and you do Facebook Lives and Insta Lives and YouTube Lives and you do your podcast from there. And you're continuing to try to make this podcast, which is great, a real thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like a thing that brings you income and like really
eventually.
Well, that's the point, right? Like and becomes a big thing. And I'm impressed that even though you've been hurt and you're not in the place that you want to be, and you're battling depression and anxiety, you still have this purpose. I love that drive.
Yeah.
Can you find that drive that makes you want to do this podcast? Can you find it right now as you're sitting there?
I had. It was that door that I've been telling you that.
But you're still doing it, right?
Yeah.
Only you're still here today talking to me.
Only because I don't want to turn around and say, you know what, fuck yous all, because.
And what happens if you think about turning around and saying fuck yous all and just canceling all of the rest of them? What happens when you think about doing that?
The self-isolation.
Yeah. So even just doing this podcast,
it keeps me busy for a little bit.
It keeps you busy. It does keep you interacting with other humans, if virtually.
Yeah.
So this is actually doing something for you too.
Right. Well, like I had mentioned earlier, an actual psychiatrist, when I was going to the psychiatrist that I did this podcast, that's when he said, this podcast is your therapy. And I looked at this, and he was, at that time, that was virtual too. And when he said that, I looked at him and I was like, what? No.
You get it now?
Well, it took a little bit of time for it to click in.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's actually right. I said, yeah. I'm starting to feel like, yes, this is my therapy. This, this does get me interactive. I mean, and I'll tell you, Betsy, when I was married, I'm divorced, and my ex-wife was very controlling, cheating. I mean, so there's more to that anxiety, depression.
Of course there is. This doesn't come out of nowhere, Joey.
Right. Because every relationship I had cheated on me as well. So it came, as a tag team. So like when I go to take the walks, I may feel okay because I'm out there, walking, well, in my case, limping because of my age. But I don't feel the complete because I'm alone. There's not someone in my life that I can enjoy it with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything down the line. I mean, if I saw a happy couple, I'm crying inside because I miss that.
Yeah.
I miss that relationship thing.
Yeah, I hear that.
And then even with some of the relationships that I would be happy to have, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Friends with Benefits. That's kind of what I wanted, at least to start, because I wanted to be able to still do everything that I'm doing, and take the special someone with me down there to enjoy it with, because it's that boost right there of confidence that's saying, hey, you got somebody with you. You won't have to be at the slot machines all the time. You'll be able to do other things. And within that, it maybe might get me to smile or get me to enjoy what life is actually bringing, even through that person. But again, it's all like a joke when it comes to that, in reference to it. Because then I'll turn around, I've turned around, and if even virtually, I'll remind myself, and if to anybody, I really would say I'm not the greatest looking guy. I'm not, I feel like I'm a creep inside, because there have been times I've walked out, out and about, and one person literally called me a creep right in front of my face, out in the public, and I was like, and this was late at night too. I was creepy looking, and it really hurt me, because I'm trying to keep within myself. Oh, I'm okay. I can get by. And then my ex-wife, when I married her, she was 5'4", 345. I tell her how beautiful she is, but yet she would turn around and say, no, I'm fat and I'm ugly. Well, guess what?
Yeah, we all have those issues, don't we?
Yeah, well, it started to rub onto me now. And now I feel like I'm fat and ugly. That I picked up on that. And that, but if I could, I can tell people they're beautiful, and they're like, oh yeah, you're good looking, you're sexy. Sexy? I'm like, yeah, right. But sometimes I let it, I take that in, just so it could boost me. But yeah. deep down, I know I'm not. Mm-hmm. And then now I may get criticism for this, because this is supposed to be about you, Betsy. And for the past half hour, it's been me, and I apologize for that.
This is my job.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I thank you for everything in reference to it, and really dealing with this in reference.
Joey, I would hold on to the fact that you have purpose, and that you actually get interactions with people, and you've had to expand because you've got so many additional interviews now. Mm-hmm. You've had to expand from 3 days a week to 5 days a week?
Yeah, 5, yeah, for right now.
Yeah, but even just right now, remember that you have good with the bad. That's I would say that's my first suggestion, is to remember that you have purpose, and that you're thankful that you're alive, even if it's not all the way, even if it's not as much as you want. We don't always have the capacity to hold as much as we want. Right. So we hold as much as we can.
Right.
So we hold that we can walk to the grocery store and McDonald's and the casino. And we hold that we have a podcast that's successful and busy. and might even be wildly more successful if we keep doing it.
Yeah. I mean,
And yes, there's bad
actually,
stuff. There's
I'll actually,
always bad stuff.
yeah, I could actually say on the 4th of July, I had this craving for, here in Philadelphia, we have Wawa,
Mm-hmm.
and they make hoagies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I was in the craving for a hoagie at get this, 4:00 in the morning. Okay. Like 4:30 in the morning. So I walked to the Wawa. Unfortunately, their machines were down. I'm like, ah! And the lady behind the counter was like, oh, we don't start doing it until 7:00. So the next Wawa was about 1.5 miles away. Well, as I was walking through, there's one place in Philadelphia, Betsy, if you ever come to Philadelphia, one place you ever want to check out is called Rittenhouse Square. It's beautiful. I mean, there's a lot of benches. It looks like a park. And in the center, there's a security tower. And there's a fountain and all this beautiful scenery. Well, on the far right-hand side, there was a museum that was being renovated. Well, it caught on fire. So for about 1.5 hours, I did a TikTok live, I did a Facebook live, I did an Instagram live showing this fire. I actually attempted to take this podcast into live news, because I was like, it was just something interesting, I was like, a podcast doing a live news event, and there's 2 news crews right in front of me and so on. So I did it. I mean, it didn't come out the greatest, but I was kind of okay. But when I was originally standing there, there was a fireman on the left-hand side of me, and he was like saying that building was being renovated, that there was a gift in there that was worth over $250 million.
Mm.
And they don't know if it was in there or not, but the building was a total loss.
Mm.
That I knew, because I was a volunteer fireman back in 1989, because my late father was a volunteer fireman. He was a fire chief even. So I kind of attempted to follow his footsteps in reference to that. But it didn't last because I was also in summer college. So when most people had 3 months to enjoy a summer vacation, I had 3 days. Mm-hmm. So, but it felt interesting, attempting to do that for the podcast.
Yeah.
And it only got 2 views.
Was it 4 a.m?
Well, no, actually, that was post.
So 5 a.m?
Post 5 a.m. when I put the video out.
Okay. That's
the video went out
even for Pacific time.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it went off the live stream, it got 2 views. But when I mentioned earlier about that door, about the number 1 fan, the number 1 supporter, the virtual, if that person that I wanted in the meet and greet, if I posted that person on this live stream, much more views than 2. And but it hurts because, again, it turned out to feel like an act. But all right, so we're getting ready to come up to the hour. Betsy, how can people reach out to you?
My website is the best way. You can get on my email list. You can look at my offerings. You can send a message to me through the website, betsykudlinski.com. It's right on the screen. And I have a couple of groups starting immediately, but then I also have a couple of groups starting in September. I work individually with people. I have a free group at the end of every month. It's an hour long. There's lots of ways. I'm also on Facebook and Blue Sky.
Okay.
And YouTube.
Okay. Betsy, thank you so much. And again, I apologize that I took time away from you in reference to, me in reference to it. Because again, when people see this post live stream, they're like, well, you put yourself in the middle again. It's supposed to be the life with the guest, not with you, So, but you are welcome to come back on anytime, if you feel that, something good is coming up and you want to promote it, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to have you on and really,
Joey.
yeah. And, have you on and, help you promote it. All right, folks. Thank you so much for watching the Life with Joey Calvo podcast. God bless you all.